President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will officially inaugurate the new Suez Canal next Thursday. The opening ceremony will be attended by a number of heads of states from around the world. Invitations are free of charge for the citizens chosen to attend the opening ceremony. The government will fund the opening ceremony through public donations and contributions from the dredging companies responsible for digging the new channel. In an unprecedented tradition, ships at ports across the world will blow their horns at the same time on August 6th, greeting the new Suez Canal achievement. Construction was initially scheduled to take 5 years, which was reduced to 3 years and finally ordered by the president to be completed in 1 year. The new canal runs pretty much parallel to the existing canal, and when in action will increase capacity from around 50 to 100 ships per day by allowing 24/7 two-way traffic rather than the current system of one-way convoys. In addition to 6 new tunnels for cars and trains are planned to end the isolation of the Sinai by connecting it to Egypt's mainland. The canal itself is a vital source of hard currency for Egypt. The new Suez Canal officially opened early this August. It will represent not only an important project for the nation, but a significant achievement for the men, machines and the vessels responsible for the feat. With its iconic status, massive earthworks and dredging of millions of cubic meters of material, the infrastructure project is the largest to be completed this year in the Middle East. The price tag for the whole scheme rings in an $8.5 billion paid by the Egyptian public through an investment certificate scheme, with the money raised in just 6 days. On all 72 kilometers, vessels will be able to travel in both directions. Ships will still have to travel in convoys, but the improvements are expected to shorten the transit time from 18 hours to 11 hours for the southbound convoy and reduce waiting time for under 3 hours, down from 8 to 11. This is expected to make the canal the shortest route between Europe and Asia and more attractive option for shipping companies. And the Suez Canal authorities expect the average daily number of vessels transiting to nearly double by 2023, from 49 to 97, bringing in much needed foreign currency for the state's coffers. The project has been labeled a rebirth for Egypt.
Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching Nile Cruise live on Nile TV International, and we're going to be talking in this segment also about the Suez Canal project. That the whole world is talking about. That the inauguration ceremony is just around the corner. Many experts believe that this mega project is a bridge to success, as it was quoted by General Moheb Mamish, the head of the Suez Canal Authority, and also the whole world has praised this project, and it's said that it's the door or the window to the new Egypt. And to discuss the ramifications and the consequences of this project, we're most delighted to be joined here on location by Dr. Ahmed Mahanan. He's professor of political economics. Doctor, thank you so much and good afternoon.
Thanks, and congratulations to Egypt.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Let me start off with the first question. What message does the experimental passage of the 3 huge ships actually deliver to the Egyptians and to the world?
I believe the head of the insurance committee was here, the international committee that is responsible for insuring, like Deloitte, insuring the ships and the international trade routes. We're here 2 days ago to basically witness the passage of the 3 ships particularly, and also witness all sites on hand. And I think this is a clear endorsement from insurance company number 1 that this is a safe passage, and the Egyptians have really managed to do it in a year, and it's quite secure for them to be able to pay companies or the ships money in case any accidents take place. So number 1, this is an endorsement from these companies. Number 2, there's also the head of the Marine Association was also here with Mr. Mohab to witness the work, and this is also again an endorsement from International Association. On top of that, I think the international media is really playing a major role to basically highlight the changes in international trade in the next few months, because this is basically going to increase the trade passing from the Suez Canal from about 12% to about 35% in the next months to come, and also ensures that the canal is able to accommodate double the number of ships, because at the moment we receive about 47 ships a day, and with the parallel channel of the 35 kilometers, I think that increases it to about 98 ships, in addition to the actual development of Egypt, the poverty alleviation, which basically part of the international or the United Nations program, basically. So on all fronts, this great project will ensure that Egypt on its way to the first century.
Yes, sir, as an expert, an economic expert, do you believe that the revenues or the positive outcome will be felt right away after the inauguration, or is it a long-term
I think more than the economic benefits that we will gain from the Suez Canal, I think the social and cultural benefits that we will see in terms of the self-destruction frustrations that really covered the entire of Egypt over the past 30 years. So Egyptians after a long time see or can basically have a confidence on themselves that establish mega projects and can achieve it and achieve a record. And I believe Guinness Record is also talking about this to put it in their record. So in terms of the social and cultural changes on a mindset to value work, I think it's going to impact on as an economic benefit on the long run, that Egyptians will start to invest more and more into the mega projects and put Egypt on the 21st century. The second part in terms of the economic benefit, yes, it will be felt, and that's on 3 main areas. Number 1, the increase of the revenue from passing the Suez Canal from about $5.6 billion to about $6.5 billion increase per annum. So we're talking about $13 billion as it was basically studied in the plan by the year 2023. Number 2, in terms of developing the whole corridor, we're talking about 42 projects, and basically including particularly in addition to the industrial zones, the tourist zones, as well population areas. I think we're going to see 7 tunnels. 2 of them accommodate trains, which basically tying the trade routes, the old Silk Road that would tie the 3 continents, Africa, Asia and Europe. On top of that, there's also an increase in revenue measured at about $100 billion. And this is not a lot. A lot of people are saying this is quite a lot. Now, Jebel Ali in Emirates achieved annually about $7.3 billion. This year, with the agreement between Iran and 5+1 on the nuclear program of Iran, I think that will increase the revenue as expected from Jebel Ali to about $10 billion. If you're looking at the size of Suez Canal corridor along 193 kilometers on both sides, in addition to the development in Sinai and on the western side between Sinai and eastern Delta, I think easily is going to reach $100 billion. That's number 2. Number 3, I think more than that is the movement of the population. Through the investment certificates, we managed to move 64 billion Egyptian pounds from the Delta, that we're about 60% of them are in the informal sector inside the greater carrier. Move that into the Suez Canal development area, and that basically gives Egyptians a lot of confidence to invest in that particular area, because it's a very fragile in a very security-wise
as an expert again, Dr. Ahmed, do you think that the project is actually taking into consideration all the national security measures?
Absolutely. Part of it's actually the mega plan of the Suez Canal the development corridor is actually taking into account 5 main shields that will maximize the security issues. Number one is the industrialization shield, which basically having industrial areas on both sides, so basically makes it very difficult for any invaders to come from the east. Number two, we're talking about 18 population areas, so basically having a human shield, as you know. So if you look at Israel attacking Hezbollah, for example, they can always attack them by air force, but they can never invade them on a ground level. And this is basically the second shield that we're talking about, is the human shield, so industrial, human. We're talking about trade and tourist areas. There's a lot of yacht and tourist activities in that particular area, cruise routes, hotels, restaurants, filling stations, factories, so a lot of that. On top of that, with the movements of the capital towards the east is going to create a diplomatic shield, because we're talking about the movement of 193 embassies, 400 associations on top of the United Nations organizations as well as the Arab League organizations. So slowly we're going to have movements towards the east into Sinai. Exactly. So we basically, quite frankly, using the whole world to support us in securing Sinai, because they have interest. And on top of that, we've got the two free zones, the Russian and Chinese. So any invaders from the east will have to think 10 times because before they invade Sinai, because they know that there's a lot of interest for Russian, Germans, Chinese, Korean, and so on.
And also, I believe the development of Sinai might help in bringing an end to the threats or the terrorist attacks.
Absolutely, it's one of the factors here is the human shield. It's quite important, and having the tourist and trade areas by filling Sinai with foreign tourists, foreign companies in terms of investment, it created interest for a lot of major economic countries, and it becomes basically an international zone as it was in Hong Kong. So it's not an Egyptian zone anymore, it's an international trade zone. And adding to that the petrol market that will be established in Sinai, so you're going to have a hub for petrol selling and buying, ships passing through. They want to buy petrol from one country so they can buy from a particular area. And the second project is the crops that will be established in the Meta. So here you're creating an interest for the whole world on this particular area, so they become helpers to the Egyptians in securing Sinai.
And Dr. Ahmed, as we are, of course, currently Egypt is facing terrorism now, what do you think would be the current media? What's the role of the media?
I think the role of the media is quite great with the Ministry of Culture, because terrorism is part of the mega plan that was established in the 70s by Bernard Lewis, when that was submitted to Mr. Jimmy Carter, and as we consider him the pigeon of peace, and he's not. It's actually the first part of that was the erosion of culture, education, the administrative corruption, food security, and the end is the actual clash with the army. These are 6 factors that characterize the mega plan against Egypt to destroy it. So looking at the terrorism is part of the mega plan. So how we treat that is a thought with thought, idea with an idea, and fight. That's how we fight. It's not just wise, but also with development. So if we manage to erode or wipe out poverty, create a creative thinking, and whatever we can do with the locals definitely will dry out all routes feeding into terrorism. In terms of Sinai, we're dealing with this at the moment with the army, but on top of that, we're going to have to use the international media, as you said, with the Ministry of Culture, and particularly try to highlight the modernism of Islam and the modernism of thinking, of proper thinking, and basically with the interest of the world, I think there's going to be a lot of exchange in cultures, and that will wipe out.
Speaking also about bolstering the future of the economy, can you elaborate more on that?
The Egyptian economy really suffers a number of factors: the high unemployment rate, slow growth of the economy. We've got tourism affecting 3 main areas. Number one is tourism, export, and on top of that is the foreign investment. And those are the 3 areas that we can increase the foreign reserve: tourism, the foreign investment, bring dollar, and production, local production to be exported, and the 3 of them are affected by terrorism. So if we can wipe out all routes leading and strengthening tourism, we can basically have a strengthening economy. On top of that, we're going to have more than 1.5 million jobs created in the Suez Canal corridor, and that basically will alleviate poverty more. On top of that, We're going to have a lot of foreign direct investment, and that is basically ensured by the endorsement of the International Marine Association on top of the economic forum that was done in March. So definitely we're looking at a number of projects amount to 22 mega projects like the Suez Canal. This is just the beginning of the second crossing, let's say, and from there on we're going to have a lot of mega projects that can serve the entire country, and the redistribution of wealth, redistribution of the population along the all areas to utilize all resources.
And Dr. Ahmed, there were suggestions from the expatriates, the Egyptian expatriates, to launch maybe a coin or a banknote to commemorate the opening of the mega project.
Absolutely, it's a great idea.
Do you think this would be a good idea to maybe market our country
Absolutely,
even more?
and it's particularly helpful for the cultural understanding for our kids later on. Now we can see there's a lot of...
as a memory to be
Absolutely,
kept.
and memories, and it makes Egyptians proud. That's why I said at the beginning, the actual social impact that we're going to have from the Suez Canal is a lot far better than the economic, because of the self-destruction and feeling defeated by the whole world. We've got no value whatsoever in the past 30 years. Now, yes, the world comes to us to pass through. The world respects us because we've got strategic point for international trade. We can plug the whole world. And we're seeing now with the petrol market as well as the crops market, I think we're going to have a lot of strengths. And my expectation in the next 5 years, Egypt will be expanding to the top 20 economies in the world. But we need to focus on the next project on two areas. Number one is administrative reform to fight corruption, and number two, focus on energy, because that's what the world needs.
Away from the positive aspect, what are the potential challenges this project to succeed?
Finances. I think the problem that Egypt always faces is finances, but I think the Egyptians now have really presented a huge lesson and set the precedent that any country can build its own by the local currency. And we've always, and I remember on a Nile TV I had this conversation way before the Suez Canal, and one of the questions always raised is, where do we get the money for the Suez Canal corridor? And I always knew that we have an informal sector that amounts in trade annually 1.2 trillion Egyptian pounds. So we've got a lot of money. The problem is not utilized. And that's number one, because of the administrative corruption. People don't trust the government, and people don't trust the initiatives of government, because in the last 30 years we've never really seen any mega projects where the Egyptians can participate. So for the first time, Egyptians can see, as we say, a project with a head and legs. Where it starts, where it ends, what are the benefits. And most importantly, as a smart objective, is people are trusting the government or the political regime because it adheres to the time frame. That's the most important. And there's a lot of more companies that exist, and Egyptians will definitely participate in a mega project.
And how do you think, Doctor, the inauguration on Thursday will affect tourism?
Definitely we will encourage international tourists, because number one, it ensures that there is a security in Egypt. And number two, Egypt on its way. That's number one. And I think the entire world now moves about 85% of economies worldwide are services, and 15% on production. So whatever we see in cars, ships, trains, it's all 15% of the world economy. 85% of the world economy really focus on services like banking, insurance, tourism. So the Suez Canal corridor will basically induce a trust in Egypt to become a hub for services, as we've seen in Dubai. So what we need to focus on now in terms of services and also tourism is part of it, is tourism, technology to become a technical hub like India, and on top of that focus on physical production.
Karim, do you have a question?
If anything else you'd like to add, sir?
I think President Sisi has really put a good example to lead a nation. Egyptians really always lacked political leadership, and we've seen when they have a proper leadership, like we've seen in 1952, President Nasser, and then focusing, achieving in 1978 the highest economic growth in the world, 6.9%, and the Egyptian economy at that time really amounted 3 times the economy of Korea. We're talking even after the 1967 war and the defeat of Egypt, we looked in 1968, just with the right leadership, 1968 the completion of the High Dam, 1969 the highest economic growth again in the world, I think to $250 million in surplus. So that amounts today to $7 billion. So when we have the right leadership, we basically proceed in a second president or the second republic, let's say, President Sadat also led the nation to the liberalization of Sinai. I think the former President Mubarak destroyed Egypt, and President Sisi has got a lot to do in the next few years to come, but people need to support him and be behind him.
Yes, I'm afraid we're running out of time, but really do appreciate your insight. Dr. Ahmed Mahanna, Professor of Political Economics, thank you so much for joining us on Nile Cruise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you.
And dear viewers,
we're going to go for a short break and we'll be right back.